Hey, Luis. What's
Good
going on?
morning.
So, before we get into all the fancy stuff, I want to ask you a question. I always ask lawyers
Oh boy.
is why did you become a lawyer? Because I almost thought about doing it one time, and then I realized how much work it takes, and was like, wait a second, I have to work, and then I realized that as a journalist, I have to work a lot and then not get paid, so it doesn't. So really, I made a terrible choice, but
That's right. Well, I got into it because I wanted to save the world, right? That's
Well,
why
yeah.
most lawyers get into it. And my path has been somewhat unconventional to getting to Grand Rapids and Varnum. And I feel like I'm doing more of that now than I did before in jobs that you would traditionally think are jobs saving the world. So right out of law school, I went to work for the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights in Geneva.
Wow,
So you would think, there you go, you're
Right,
saving the
that's-
world, human rights work.
it's perfect.
And it wasn't really
No.
the case. I didn't feel that way. Somewhat disillusioned. I feel like I'm doing much more of an impact now
Really,
here in Grand Rapids than I was there.
that's pretty cool. Why do you feel that way? Is it just what you're the proximity to what you're doing, or
Honestly, I think it has to do a lot with where I am. I'm not sure I would be saying the same thing if I was at different firms or in different cities.
okay?
My own classmates out of law school, a lot of them have become very disillusioned with the practice of law because it's very long hours, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of pressure, and they feel like they're just chained to a desk all day. Whereas here, I get to go out in the community and be involved, which is really
Right.
cool.
Okay. So how did you end up in Grand Rapids then?
The first time I came here was for college, actually, somewhat
Okay.
sight unseen. I moved from Miami, Florida to Grand Rapids, Michigan to go to Calvin. Still wondering what made that decision, especially during winters.
Yeah, was it just
Well, it was a mix of circumstances, but my dad got a job at Calvin Seminary.
okay?
So when I came up here, really to move him in, and my brother, who was also going to attend, he's a few years older than me, I thought, you know what, I think I might give this Calvin College a try. So moved out here.
Huh. So then,
Stuck around for a few years after, worked for a big bank, hated banking, just did not like it, and decided, you know what, let's do law school. So moved to Ann Arbor, went to UM, and a lot of hopping around after that, and eventually made my way back here about 6 years ago now.
okay. So what? Let's talk more about MiSpringboard because that's what's on my sheet here. I'm using my cheat sheet.
There you go.
I mean, how did you? What is it? I guess for people listening who don't know what it is.
Yeah, and frankly, I think everybody should know what it is because everybody wants a free lawyer, and that's essentially what this program is.
Wow.
So back in 2011, Varnum looked around, saw that the Michigan economy was kind of in the tank, right? We were still just starting to climb out of the recession. And as you can imagine, when there's a big economic recession, a lot of people lose their jobs, and then a lot of companies are not hiring.
Right.
So these people that lose their jobs think, well, you know what? I'm going to start my own business, right? I'm going to become an entrepreneur by necessity, not really by choice. But one of the biggest blocks that companies have, young companies, are the cost of service providers.
Right.
And legal services are right up there, right? So we look around and we think, you know what? There is a big need for these entrepreneurs that are going to be the job creators of tomorrow, driving the economy, to get legal services, to really get their company off the ground.
Right.
So we designed this program, this MiSpringboard program, where we committed over a 5-year period $1 million in free legal services to Michigan startups and second stage companies. And it's worked out really, really well. So just last year in 2016, we concluded the 5 years and we thought this was a big success. We really liked it. Let's do it again. And this time, there wasn't really that huge of a need in terms of just the economic necessity. But now entrepreneurs are, we see more and more of them now, right? Colleges are not just cranking out employees, but they're cranking out business owners.
Right.
So we thought, you know what, let's do this for another 5 years and see where it takes us.
So then once they get out of the startup phase or the second stage, do they maintain you guys as for legal services?
Yeah. So obviously we're a law firm.
Right.
We're not a nonprofit. So this is, I'd be lying to you if I were to say this is 100% altruistic. We're doing this for, the advancement of humanity. But at the same time, we think, you know what? We think we're super valuable and we think we provide real value to our clients. So we think after they're done with the free legal services, they'll want to stick around.
Right.
And more often than not, they do.
Okay.
They say, you know what? We think that you guys were valuable enough to now when I have to pay for it, I'd still like to use you. And it's worked out fairly well for us.
Yeah. So how many clients have you worked with then through that program?
We are up north of 300 now.
Wow.
So quite a few. And what's really cool is that in the first 5 years, this program, it was really just the doors were open. Whatever your idea was, whether you wanted to have like a dog walking service or a beauty salon, or you wanted to be the next Google, like we didn't care. Just come in, we'll offer you some legal services. So it really kind of ran the gamut, and it still does.
Okay.
I think now we've become a little more sophisticated ourselves in just how we approach potential clients. So one of the things that we realized when people are getting free legal services, they'll come to you with any question, right? They think that lawyers have the answers for everything. And oftentimes we were having people asking us things that were frankly maybe too early still in their own company.
Okay.
They weren't ready for lawyers just yet. They really had questions that had to do more with business strategy or marketing or even just designing of their product or services. And we're like, we don't really know. And this is not a good use of your money or your free legal services to come to us for this. Your free money, exactly. Why don't you wait until you have some real work that we can do, that we can provide real value to you, and then let's do that. So we've gotten a lot better at, I don't want to say vetting because that's not really what we do, but we work now with we have a large network of organizations, businesses, colleges, you name it, that essentially end up serving as our referral sources. So they do a lot of the hand-holding at the very, very early stage. And then they say, okay, now we think you're at a point where you need a lawyer. Let's talk to Varnum.
Okay. Yeah. So where did this idea come from? I mean, it was a tough time in Michigan's economy, but did you have anything to draw on? Was there other service or other types of services that were doing this other than legal that you guys saw and were like, we should do something like that?
We should be doing that.
Yeah.
As far as I know, well, we're definitely the only firm in Michigan doing that. And as far as I know, I think we're the only firm nationwide that has a program where we're just saying, we're not using some sort of pro bono approach, because that's not what this is. Right. So every firm in the world has a pro bono program, right? Where we say, you know what, if you have a demonstrated financial need, we'll take you on as a client and we'll do it for free and all that. This is not the case. These are not pro bono clients. These are real Varnum clients. And we bill to their account just like we do to any other client in the firm, except we just don't charge them for them, which is kind of cool. So we were definitely, I think still are, kind of pioneers in this, which is why we've also had, like I was mentioning earlier, some areas to learn from where we were doing this. We've never done this before. And the response was actually really, really positive, even though surprisingly enough, and this still shocks me, we weren't able to use $1 million in the first 5 years.
Really?
So even though it was just free legal services open to anyone in Michigan that wanted to use them, we couldn't give it away.
So you're saying I should come up with some ideas.
Exactly. Okay. Start your own business.
Okay. Got it. So can you talk about any of the clients, or is that,
Yeah. So we have permission from a lot of our clients to talk about them. And frankly, that's part of what makes this such a cool program, that these are really, they're the innovators. They're really the exciting people to talk to, right? And it's kind of cool to just be a little part of their growth and hopefully their success. So one company that I'm personally involved with and I'm really excited is called KSEC Technologies. And part of the reason that I'm excited about it is because the owner, he's a PhD in something super fancy out of University of Michigan, could have gone anywhere, and in fact had a lot of opportunities to go and start his company anywhere in the country, even internationally, and decided to come here to Grand Rapids because he saw a community that supports startups and supports entrepreneurs. So he started his company here in Grand Rapids a few years ago. And it really stemmed out of him identifying the craft beer industry as having a very big waste problem, particularly in CO2.
Yeah.
And this is in news, right? Breweries know about this.
Right.
So as part of their, and I know nothing about brewing, by the way, so bear with me if I describe this terribly. As part of their brewing process, they have a fair amount of CO2 emissions.
Right.
They emit them, they go out into the ethos. They also require CO2 for the brewing process. So they have to purchase every year a ton of CO2. So not only, so they're buying this same component that they're also emitting and essentially wasting every year, right? So what he figured out is a process to capture those emissions. So not only they're not harming the environment, but then you can reuse them for your process, right? Recycling it. Seems fairly simple, super complicated, right? But really exciting that that's happening here in Grand Rapids, because obviously we are on the map now as far as the brewing industry is concerned. So it's cool that it's happening here, that technology is going to come out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when I'm convinced when breweries across the world start using this at a larger scale, they'll be looking at Grand Rapids. So that's one example of, I think, a really exciting company.
You have to give me his contact information.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, you've done, it's not just Grand Rapids that this service is offered, though. It's statewide, right? So,
this is statewide. We have a few attorneys that are pretty active up in the UP.
Really?
I have to admit, I have not made it that far in a while, but they are up there pretty frequently. There's a couple of colleges up there that are really involved in the tech space.
Very true.
With a lot of professors that love to, create groups with their students and crank out some really cool technology, but then the technology doesn't necessarily, or historically didn't go anywhere. It was just kind of an academic exercise. Several years ago, these professors started thinking, and I think it was largely driven by student interest, of saying, well, what if we start commercializing some of this stuff that we're doing when we're in college? So now there's a big startup community up north, Houghton and Marquette and all those areas that are coming out of like MTech and organizations and universities like that, where they have a fair amount of pretty significant tech expertise. And they don't have full breadth legal service providers up north. So for us, it's been a no-brainer to say, yeah, let's go up there. We have this stuff for free that you can use in areas that I think we have significant expertise and can provide value. Because some of the stumbling blocks that these organizations, these small companies had that we've been hearing is they just didn't have legal experts up there to help them with things like patents, with things like creating stock purchase plans for employees in a small organization. Things that require a fair amount of sophistication that they just couldn't get up there, we're now able to provide.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's statewide, and Varnum itself is growing a lot, right?
Yeah, we just opened an Ann Arbor office last year. We opened a pretty nice Detroit office. So we're also expanding. And with that, we're able to also expand the MiSpringboard program.
Right.
So in the first maybe 3 or 4 years of the program, it was fairly Grand Rapids centric. We had clients from all over, but the big population was really in Grand Rapids. Now, largely driven by our efforts up north and then also our new Detroit office, we have it's a very even split now, the west side of the state, the east side of the state, and going north on either side.
So this program, it does give you, so one of the questions I always ask construction firms is, how do you end up in different parts of the country? Because, a lot of firms have offices all over, but there's local construction firms where they're going, and they say they're moving with customers. And so I ask a lot of law firms, when I don't cover law, but when I do, I ask the same thing. If you're based in Grand Rapids, how do you open a Detroit office when there's a ton of Detroit law firms
over there?
But this program can help kind of be a client getter, right?
Well,
blanket or that's
yeah,
so
we don't
poor.
necessarily consider it. I don't think that this program would be what would drive us
Right.
opening an office. It's been very, as you can imagine, lawyers love to deliberate, right? And so it's been a very carefully calculated process where we open offices and when we open them.
Yeah.
So, as an example, we have a Novi office. I don't know if your guys are familiar with Novi, but it's not that far from Detroit. But for a long time, we chose not to open a Detroit office. And I won't get into the reasons why, but we thought after many years, okay, now I think we're ready for a downtown Detroit office. And it's been a huge success, but not surprisingly, like you mentioned, driven by the volume of clients that now need services in downtown as opposed to clients that could be serviced outside, in the suburbs.
Okay. So then what are kind of your growing practice areas? I mean, and then what do you specifically focus on?
So I'm a labor and employment attorney, which is almost contradictory to my involvement in MiSpringboard because by their nature, small companies don't have employees.
Right.
The owner is the employee, right? So I don't personally do a whole lot of work. I'm super involved with meeting the clients, getting them connected within the firm to other attorneys, providing a lot of kind of relationship management efforts. I do a lot of that. I'm involved with like the pitch competitions and things like that. But then when it comes down to actually doing the legal work, unfortunately, and I say that because I'd love to do more work for our clients in that respect, I do labor and employment, where our clients through the MiSpringboard program specifically tend to really need corporate work at first, right? Business formation, operating agreements, stock purchase agreements, things like that. Now we've seen a big, and this is partly driven by our own increase in our IP group. We've seen a big interest in our IP capabilities for startups, right? You have a great idea. You want to see whether you can or should patent it, whether you want or should trademark it, things like that. So we've been able to see a fair amount of growth in the IP group in particular through this program, which I think is really cool because patents are really expensive.
I don't have one, so I don't know.
I don't have one either.
So I mean, this is really cool. So what else do you do? Because I mean, I know you're very involved in the community.
Yeah.
Beyond just helping everybody.
Well, one of the things that I really like that tie in really well with both my efforts in the community, personally my efforts in the community, and then kind of Varnum's efforts in the community, is my involvement with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So I'm the president of the board there, and we see a lot of entrepreneurs, small businesses, in this particular case, Hispanic-owned businesses, that need services, not just legal services, but they need the breadth of services. Through this program, I'm really happy to be able to say that we've also, I think, in many ways, diversified our client base. Now we have a pretty diverse client base regardless, but with this, we've been able to target the Hispanic community specifically and say, hey, we're here to help you, right? And there's no strings attached with this program. We'd love to keep you as a client, right? We'd love for you to stay. But if you don't want to, as soon as you're done with the free legal services, you can go elsewhere. Like, that's fine. So there is an a fairly altruistic component to this program that I really like, because I'm able to talk to business owners and say, yeah, by the way, if you need a lawyer and you can't afford one right now, just talk to me, right? Because we can help you with that.
Right.
Whatever it is, we can help you with it. So we've been able to partner with the Hispanic Chamber on several different fronts. For example, last year we had a business pitch competition, and Fifth Third gave the I think it was the top 3 spots, and then the winner financial incentive, I guess, for participating, and then the winner got just a cash prize. Varnum was able to come in and say, look, the top 3, we're going to give you guys kind of a special package on MiSpringboard services. So we ended up offering them slightly more than we would offer the typical startup, which is really cool. And then the winner got a pretty large amount. And what's neat about this is that there's no expiration date on it. So in the case of the winner of this particular competition, they didn't need legal services immediately. To date, they've only used really just a few hours worth of attorney's work, but that's fine. They have it there. They can come and use it when they actually need it. Part of this for us is, like I was saying earlier, providing real value to these clients and being there for them. So a long way of getting around to your question of, how does this like help in the community involvement? For me, I love it because I'm able to just go anywhere and say, guys, I know that this is a big need, particularly in the minority community. Minority entrepreneurs historically have a rougher time kind of getting the services, getting support from the community. And we've been able to target them and say, we're here for you, which is kind of cool.
That is awesome. So, again, I was looking at, I forget, I think it was your bio on the web page or something. And you do have a long list of community. Do you ever look at your schedule and go, man, I don't have time for all this?
Daily basis.
Okay.
I'm like,
just
how am I going to do all of this? So what I've realized is apparently I don't need as much sleep as I thought I did. Maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's super rewarding, right? To go out, to be in the community. Going back to our very first question that you asked, one of the things that I love about being in Grand Rapids as opposed to other places, and I've lived in a bunch of different cities in a bunch of different countries, is that I get to be a part of the community here. I always tell people, when you look at Grand Rapids 10 years from now, people our age will be able to say, I helped shape that city.
Right.
I helped shape that region. You can't do that in Chicago, in New York. You can't just raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. And people will say, yeah, right. Get involved. All we need is your time, right? And sometimes money. That helps.
Yeah.
But it's pretty exciting, right? So yeah, it can be taxing in terms of time sometimes, right? Everybody likes to just sit at home and watch TV every now and then, but going to events, getting to know people, getting involved in boards and committees, you help push the city in a direction that you feel is good. That's pretty exciting.
I think it's cool. That's why a big reason I came back after college.
Really?
So yeah, was that same reason. Was if you move to Chicago, where do you go? You just get
Exactly.
lost.
Yeah.
Probably. Sometimes I guess you can make it out. But
Cool city though.
it is a cool city. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.